Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and this week I had the run of a lifetime in Go Battle League. Starting at 2630 ELO, I proceeded to go 31 wins and 4 losses across my next 35 games to climb up to 2864 ELO, which if leaderboards were out, would easily be rank 1 in the entire world. I've showcased several of the teams that I used along the way, and today is the final one. This team was created by a trainer named Executor8787, who initially built it for the Great League. The team is as follows. It's a Titan lead, Feraligatr Safe Switch, and Payback Tentacruel in back. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches, and we're off to a great start in game number 1, leading us to Titan into Stunfisk. My opponent safe switches into Clefable, and unfortunately for my opponent, we have a completely dominant response to Clefable, as out comes Tentacruel. Tentacruel is going to do incredibly well in this matchup. I believe for the first few matches I have Poison Sting on the Tentacruel, but I end up switching over to Acid because Acid just ends up performing quite a bit better. Here my opponent is going to end up CMP tying me, and because I'm on Poison Sting, not Acid, I actually can't farm down. Normally what I like about Acid is in a lot of scenarios, you can land a charge attack and farm down, but unfortunately, you can't really do that with Poison Sting because while Poison Sting is good energy generation, it doesn't do a lot of damage. I will get a Scald onto that Stunfisk though, that does very nice damage. My opponent will be forced to fire off a Mud Bomb to take the knockout, and I'll get to send back in Titan. Titan just absolutely destroys poor Stunfisk. There's not really anything Stunfisk can do. Look at this Mud Bomb damage, that does nothing to Titan. Titan gonna farm up just shy of the back-to-back Icicle Spears. Icicle Spear into the Stunfisk, takes the knockout in the back. Oh no, Trainer. They have Galarian Moltres in the back, and they're not even gonna get to see the Feraligatr. This is just Titan going on a rampage. Titan already at 2 more Icicle Spears, and there's just no way out for my opponent. Icicle Spear number 1 is going to be shielded. Icicle Spear number 2 followed shortly thereafter, and there's just no way out. Icicle Spear, big damage, 1 more Powder Snow, taking down the Moltres, and we get the 2 shield flex. A more tricky lead in the next match, leading Titan into Shadow Dusknoir. Now this is not the worst matchup ever as long as shields are up. My opponent doesn't even build up too dynamic. They're just going to be under-tapping a Shadow Punch. Shadow Punch is pretty fine because I know I'm not going to get knocked out by it, so my opponent clearly just wants to lock in some damage. Icicle Spear will be shielded. Now I'm going to get aggressive. In comes Feraligatr, and my opponent ends up throwing on alignment once again. I'm very okay taking the Shadow Punch damage, and now out comes Galarian Moltres. This is the non-Shadow Feraligatr. I do think the non-Shadow Feraligatr is better than the Shadow right now just because you have really nice survivability. And in situations like this against the Galarian Moltres, a Shadow Ice Beam would not one-shot anyway. Hydro Cannon will get the shield. Moltres is going to get the full farm down. They leave that matchup loaded on energy, and I'm going to have to start giving up shields. Fly comes through from the Moltres. I'm just clicking Icicle Spear. I want the Moltres off the field. Moltres is going to lose quite a bit of energy as they get knocked out. Back in comes the Dusknoir. Dusknoir has to throw, or I will make it to another Icicle Spear. This 10-turn pacing on Titan is incredibly nice. Icicle Spear takes the knockout. In the back, they have Unova Stunfisk, and this game is over. Again, as I mentioned, I believe after these first 2 battles, I end up switching over to the correct moveset on Tentacruel, which I do believe is Acid. For now, we have Poison Sting, which does mean I get to these charge attacks slightly faster, but even with Acid, this endgame would still be a win. Scald does big damage, no debuff, but honestly, we don't need a debuff to win this game, because we can very comfortably tank 1 Mud Bomb, shield the second, and then outpace and make it to this Scald. Scald KOs the Stunfisk, and we're able to get the win. Hopping into the next match, leading Titan into Regidrago, the Dream Lead. Titan absolutely dominant in this matchup. Opponent safe switches into Feraligatr. I'm going to stay in and go for the superpower. Having 10-turn pacing and really nice coverage is so good on Titan because if your opponent safe switches a 10-turn pacing Pokemon, you can always outpace them and apply quite a bit of pressure. Now I have a shield advantage and I can send in Tentacruel. This is a matchup right here where you're going to notice the Acid fast move pressure is actually really good on Tentacruel. My opponent ends up double shielding, so they are full committing to the Feraligatr, but look at the amount of damage I was able to get on the Feraligatr just from the Acids. My opponent is going to pivot out, trying to stay aggressive as they send in Corviknight. I do get a debuff, I farm up just shy of the Scald, and now I send in Feraligatr. Unfortunately for my opponent, even if they land a payback, this is a debuff payback, so it's not going to do much. They go for the air cutter, fishing for the boost, but unfortunately the boost luck is not with them. Hydro Cannon is going to do very nice damage onto the Corviknight. There's a catch attempt onto Regidrago, but I'm able to hold on to my energy and unleash Ice Beam. Ice Beam is going to land. That's big damage onto Regidrago. Switch Clock should be up momentarily, and there is the catch onto Satitan. Satitan going to be hit with the Dragon Energy. That does do some pretty significant damage. Satitan can't quite get the farm down, but this should just be a Vice Grip. Vice Grip going to do a lot of damage, but Satitan is barely able to hang on. Satitan's superpower will do quite a bit of damage to whatever gets brought in here, whether it's the Feraligatr or whether they send in the Corviknight. Landing damage on this Feraligatr is very nice. My opponent double shielded the Feraligatr, trying to get as much value as they possibly can out of it, so taking the knockout with a superpower is very helpful. Oh, I actually can't quite get the knockout. They barely hold on, but I can switch into Feraligatr. Feraligatr KOs the Corviknight with all of its loaded energy. We farm down their Feraligatr, and we're able to take the win. We see a familiar lead in the next match, Satitan into Shadow Dusknoir. Now, ideally, I would much rather see this with my back Pokemon, but this is still not a bad matchup. Satitan does have the pacing edge, and if they ever let an Icicle Spear through, then the Powder Snow damage really starts to threaten. A lot of Dusknoirs love to bait in this matchup, but I feel a no-shield is too risky because sometimes they will go for the full send. They fire off Dynamic Punch, thank goodness I put up the shield, but I can force the shield back with the Icicle Spear. Look at these Powder Snows, Satitan actually putting in massive work against the Dusknoir. If my opponent Shadow Punches here, which they do, they can make a second one on 1 HP, and I would rather not take that damage on Satitan, so I end up switching out and making a catch onto the Tentacruel. My opponent is going to respond with Galarian Moltres, and obviously I don't have Blizzard, so I'm not even going to build up and bluff like I do. I'm just going to be firing off the Scald. Scald is going to connect. There is an attack drop, so a bit of good luck does go my way. This forces my opponent to Brave Bird. They are not going to be able to go for a Fly, as a Fly just simply will not take the knockout. There is the Brave Bird. They're now heavily debuffed. I throw a Powder Snow and then look to take the knockout with Icicle Spear. Icicle Spear is going to be shielded. My opponent will fire off energy. Satitan is going to get KO'd. This game is all going to come down to Feraligatr. In comes Feraligatr. My opponent is going to switch out. They have their final Pokemon as Clefable. Energy management will be everything in this endgame. Hydro Cannon, not going to two-shot, but with the Shadow Claws, maybe there's a chance that the second Hydro will KO. They're going to go for the Moonblast. That is big damage. I can't even afford to let them get to a Meteor Mash. So I will throw this Hydro Cannon right before they reach the Mash that I needed to knock out. The Hydro Cannon does knock out, and it all comes down to this. They're going to bring in the Moltres. Will they get the catch? I just keep farming. They try for a catch that they do not get, and that's going to be a win. Unfortunately, the lead's not getting any easier in the next match, leading Satitan into Malamar. It is the non-Shadow Malamar, so they don't quite have the damage of the Shadow, which is a definite plus, but Malamar does very well into Satitan and very well into the Tentacruel. However, if I can catch a superpower onto Tentacruel, suddenly that can turn things around. My opponent can't afford to stay on the field with a debuffed Malamar, so they send out Aurorus, and if this is their response to Tentacruel, then they are so weak to Tentacruel in the back. Scald absolutely rocks the Aurorus. Scald gets the attack drop. That means this Meteor Beam will suddenly be a lot less threatening. Oh my goodness, that's a very comfortable survive from Tentacruel, making it to Scald number 2. Are they going to be shielding Aurorus here? Scald gets no shielded. Down goes Aurorus. They can bring back in the Malamar, but the Malamar already took quite a bit of damage. They send in Lapras, and I decide to get aggressive as I pivot into Feraligatr. Honestly, regardless of what they brought in, I wanted to pivot into Feraligatr. I could not afford to give whatever was in back an energy head start. Now, if this Lapras does have Skull Bash, things could get tricky. I'm more than happy to double shield. Unfortunately, I end up shielding a Sparkling Aria bait, and that definitely does not feel great. However, my Shadow Claws and Hydro Cannons are slowly adding up. We're slowly chipping away at the health bar of this Lapras. I will get to another Hydro Cannon, and now I'm going to have to decide. I only have one Protect Shield left in this match. Do they have Skull Bash? I say no. I call it. It's the Sparkling Aria, and that is an absolutely massive turn of events. Back in comes Malamar, and Malamar will go for the foul play right before I'm able to get my Hydro Cannon. I can still get some pretty nice value out of this Feraligatr, so I will give up my final shield so I can start peeling shields away from the Malamar. The Malamar's not going to get this farm down. Feraligatr too healthy. That forces my opponent to throw energy, but I also got some very good damage onto that Malamar as well. In comes Satitan. Satitan will fire off this Icicle Spear just to force their final shield. I do still have some HP remaining on Tenta. I send in Tenta. Opponent needs a farm down to win, and they can't get it. They're forced to fire off energy with the Malamar. They do not have the back-to-back, and that is going to sink them. Satitan gets the farm down. Back in comes Lapras. They do not have enough energy. We make the superpower, and despite a truly terrible lead, we're able to fight our way back and take the win. You'll notice that a lot of these clips alternate between nighttime and daytime, and that is for good reason. Currently, it takes me about a full day to complete one set of GBL with how bad the queue times are at my current ELO. I went live a few days back and streamed for, I believe, an hour and 40 minutes and got one singular opponent. So unfortunately, the opponents are few and far between, so whenever I do get an opponent, I frantically go to record so I can try and get enough gameplay. Here, my opponent did end up throwing a brutal swing. Typically, no one's ever going to throw a brutal swing unless their brutal swing overheat, so I end up double shielding and it pays off in a very big way. I'm going to throw this Icicle Spear, they make a catch onto Corviknight, and this is still pretty okay. I can look to rebank a bunch of energy on Titan and then bring in the Feraligatr. Feraligatr, especially the non-shadow, is really good at absorbing energy from Corviknight. Maybe I shouldn't have given them such a big energy head start on the Feraligatr. One can argue that what I should have done was farm up slightly fewer Powder Snows, because if I switched sooner, then I could have got a second Hydro Cannon before my opponent was able to make it to their second payback. But I still think having energy on this Titan is an overall plus, so I would argue that I don't hate the way that I played this game so far, because now I can look for an incredibly aggressive farm down with this Titan. If you thought my Titan had energy before, wait until now. We now have back-to-back loaded charge stacks. My opponent sends in Gastrodon, and I end up throwing on alignment. I was anticipating them to bring in the Weezing, so I was just blind tapping that charge stack. But Gastrodon is obviously a pretty big problem, considering my final Pokemon is Tentacruel. However, I'm going to keep spamming out Icicle Spear after Icicle Spear. What this game is going to come down to is this. Do they have Water Pulse or Earth Power? If they have Earth Power, there's a very real chance I lose this game. But if they have Water Pulse, then my Tentacruel should be largely fine. Body Slam lands, in comes Tentacruel, and now the moment of truth. They've farmed up energy. Do they have the Earth Power? I can survive it, but it would do devastating damage, but they do not have it. Tentacruel able to shake off that Body Slam damage like it's nothing. Scald takes the knockout, and then all that's left is Weezing. They cannot knock out with brutal swings. Opponent sees the writing on the wall and concedes the match. Picking up a very bad lead in the next match, Titan into Clefable. I save switch into Feraligatr because even though Clefable has very efficient pacing against water types, it needs to throw a Moonblast if it wants to do any meaningful damage. The most common pairing with Clefable is Unova Stunfisk, and if there's a Stunfisk in the back, I don't really want to invest resources into my Feraligatr, so I will end up no shielding, and there is the Stunfisk right on schedule. Stunfisk will take big damage from Hydro Cannon. The question is, can they farm down? No, they cannot. I could have held on there. I would have survived the Thunder Shock, made the Hydro Cannon, and my opponent is forced to throw energy. Back in comes Titan, and I just want as much Titan farm as I can possibly get. So my opponent is going to be spamming out Mud Bomb after Mud Bomb, but Titan doesn't really care. Titan's going to get a massive energy head start, and I don't think the Clefable is going to like eating back-to-back Icicle Spears. Clefable will be able to tank one, but it's definitely not surviving the second. Back in comes Clefable. Clefable going to be hit with the Icicle Spear. That gets them very low. In the back is Jellicent. Now, this is a bit of a tricky Pokemon, but this is why we have payback on Tentacruel. A little bit of chip damage with the Icicle Spear. In comes Tentacruel. Shadow Ball is incredibly spammy from Jellicent, so even though we have super effective payback, Jellicent can still make this matchup very close. They kind of have to shield the payback, so Scald Bait feels like a pretty safe bait, but my opponent stone cold bait call, and with that bait, I may have just lost this game. Oh my goodness, I thought that bait was so safe. Now my opponent's baiting back. They bait with the Surf, I put up the shield, and this endgame should have been winning for me, but now it's all going wrong, until I get a Scald debuff. That means I can now survive this charge stack. Shadow Ball will do big damage, but it will not do enough to take the KO. This Scald will get them very, very low. My opponent is going to be no shielding, and back in comes the Titan. In comes Clefable. I'll fire off energy right before they're able to make their Meteor Mash. Icicle Spear is going to be shielded. They undertap the Meteor Mash, and I put up the shield. This game all comes down to this. If they have a charge attack loaded on that Jellicent, they win the game, but they're one off. They did not have it. Even with that terrible bait in the mid-game and a heroic bait call from my opponent, we're still able to get the win. Hopping into the final match, leading Titan into Florges. This is a pretty good matchup for Titan. Opponent's going to be safe switching, trying for an Icicle Spear catch onto their Licky Licky, but now Licky Licky is about to get absolutely crushed under the weight of Superpower. I'm going to be firing off back-to-back Superpowers. I want to lock in some damage on Licky Licky because I don't really have a strong answer to Licky Licky in the back. Bad news for me is this Licky Licky is absolutely loaded on energy. Shadow Ball isn't going to do a ton of damage, but it adds up quite a bit over time. I know that my Hydro Cannon will not knock out, so I don't really want to throw this energy just yet. Instead, I'm going to get a little bit of residual, and now I'll go for the Hydro. Hydro is going to be connecting, getting Licky Licky very low, and if my opponent wants to play for switch advantage, I decide that I'm at the very least going to match shields. If they go down 2 shields, I think I'm actually not going to play for switch. I'm instead just going to play for Titan energy. So when they double shield, I decide to just let this go. Whether the Florges is aligned onto my Titan or onto my Tentacruel, neither matchup is awful, so I feel pretty okay with this decision, because shield advantage oftentimes can be very, very clutch. Body Slam lands, I'm going to get that full farm down, exiting with a ton of energy. In the back is Jellicent, and Tentacruel is set up to close out this game. Back in comes the Florges. Florges just going to be spamming out Chilling Water after Chilling Water. Even though I'm debuffed, the thing to watch in this matchup is going to be the acid damage. My opponent will consistently apply debuff after debuff, but having this fast move pressure, even when I'm at -2, is really, really good for Tentacruel. I'm now going to fire off the Scald. Scald is going to land. We get a Scald attack drop, but either way, at this point, we are in a very, very good spot. My opponent goes for the Moonblast. That's not going to do much. I'm so heavily debuffed that I need to pivot out, but I have a payback loaded. So at this point, I'm feeling pretty good. I'm just going to throw a few Icicle Spears as Titan, get my opponent into payback range, and from here, this game is just over. My opponent can never throw to knock me out here, which is a little bit funny, because if they throw, then their clock's not up and they get hit with the payback. So my opponent is forced to actually just farm way over 100 energy to try and burn the clock. So now the clock is finally up and I have a 50-50 call to make. I decide to go for the snipe and I go for the Scald because this would take the knockout at this point. Scald will KO that Jellicent. All that's left in the back is the very low health Florges, and we're able to get the win. All in all, I had an absolute blast running this team. This team is definitely a bit more anti-meta, as you don't see a lot of Titans, but I do think Titan is a very strong Pokemon. We saw it in the Great League, it did very well. It did very well in the Ultra League as well. I think anti-meta is kind of the perfect descriptor for it. Its typing really holds it back, in that being mono ice, really not where you want to be defensively, as you basically have no resistances. However, it has an incredibly efficient moveset. Never really having to bait, because both of your charge attacks you can get to in 10 turns is incredibly nice. And with the buff to Powder Snow, the buff to Icicle Spear, and Superpower already being an incredibly efficient attack, it's obviously going to have its problematic matchups, but I think Titan has carved out a really nice anti-meta niche, where it can do something that a lot of the other ice types cannot, and that is really efficiently hit back against steel types. That's something where even Sandslash for Drill Run is 665. For Wall Rain, you're farming all the way up to 9 Powder Snows for an Earthquake. So I think that is part of the appeal of Titan. It's really consistent in terms of its pacing and its damage output, and all in all, I think it's a really nice anti-meta Pokemon. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you're enjoying the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you have not. And an extra special thank you as always to our channel members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide is so sincerely appreciated. So thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.